What do you think of when you hear the name Call of Duty? For some, it represents childhood memories. For others, it represents everything wrong with gaming nowadays. And for some, they don't think about the game in general, but its player base. A player base that can only be described as unique. And ever since its inception back in 2003, it's only gotten larger. But with this massive fan base comes one very unfortunate thing: degenerates. Or the worst of these fans. And it's not like COD is known for having a great fan base to begin with.
Probably one of them that's used to getting sucker punched, you f***it.
Cocky ass. There you go, you
But it's extremely telling when this is tame in comparison to what I'm going to show you, so content warning from here on out as it's going to get pretty dark. So with that out of the way, we're going to start with someone who decided to do one of the worst things imaginable: taking the life of another person and deciding they needed to show other people their deed. This is the story of Guilherme Avles Costa, or the COD mobile murderer. She was like a lamb to the slaughter. Guilherme Avles Costa, or who we'll call Guilherme for the duration of this video, had experienced nothing but hardship in his early life. Growing up idolizing his father and older brother, it was only natural that all he wanted was a normal life. For reasons unknown, Guilherme's father was absent most of his life, so the boy took to religion to try to mend the wounds his father made. But this ultimately led to pain as well, as he'd witness his brother die in front of him from severe narcotics addiction. These two events would make Guilherme question his faith and set him down a spiral that would cost him everything, which would bring us to January of 2021, where it would be the first time that Guilherme would meet Ingrid Olivier Bueno, as the two would cross paths often as the two shared similar circles, as the two were amateur pro players of the game Call of Duty Mobile. Guilherme, who was a member of the team Gamers Elite and who went by the gamertag Flashlight, and Ingrid, who played for the amateur team Fantastic Brazil Impact, or FBI, and went by the gamertag of Soul. This close connection would naturally cause the two to come together, and while it couldn't be confirmed for certain, it was believed the two were in a semi-romantic or at least close relationship. The two, while not knowing each other for long, had met up with each other in person on multiple occasions, and it had gotten to the point where Ingrid had become a sort of confidant for Guilherme. He would tell her his darkest fears and secrets, and she would be there for him, and try to help him through his issues, as she felt compassion for the lost boy. But unfortunately, these meetings would start to plant the seeds for the deadly events that would happen just a month later. According to Ingrid's father, to an open letter to the press, he explained she would often lie to him, saying that Guilherme was a work friend, and believed that Guilherme would use the death of his brother and his father's absence as a way to attract the young woman. This manipulation tactic would end up working, as on February 22nd, 2021, Guilherme had messaged Ingrid, telling her to come see him, even though Ingrid had told him she'd contracted COVID earlier that week. He was persistent and told her to come anyway, and this was ultimately enough to convince the girl to travel to his house in the northern part of Sao Paulo. Her arriving at his house at around 10 a.m., where everyone in Guilherme's family was still eating breakfast. But when everyone had left the house at around 2:30 p.m. is when the carnage began, as Guilherme brutally attacked Ingrid, and while Ingrid tried her hardest to protect herself from the monster she thought was once her friend, it was all for naught, as he stabbed her over 100 times in the chest, and slashing her throat to the point of where he almost decapitated the young girl. He had even left one of the murder weapons, a large knife, inside Ingrid during the attack. After the truly horrific scene, and in some inexplicable reason, Guilherme began taking pictures and videos of Ingrid's dead body and sending them to his amateur COD team's WhatsApp group chat, and even saying in one of the videos that she was like a lamb to the slaughter, and even laughing at the corpse of the young woman he had just killed. Accompanying these disturbed images and videos was a 52-page document that was a manifesto of sorts, stating Guilherme's reason for murder and plans for future murders. After receiving the disturbing media from the now killer, the group chat, convinced they were being involved in some sick pranks, that the blood in the videos and pictures wasn't real and that it was just paint. But Guilherme would reassure everyone that the murder was real by sending many more videos, reiterating that the blood was real and that he really killed the young girl. After this tirade, the timeline gets blurry, but what we can piece together from police reports, testimony from Guilherme's family, and from the man himself is that right after the crime, Guilherme had left the scene fully intending to commit suicide, but after one of his brothers came home and found the gruesome scene, he messaged Guilherme and asked if they could meet, in a last-ditch effort to convince the young man to give himself up. This ultimately proved successful, as 30 minutes after the murder had taken place, Guilherme gave himself up to police, where in a now viral video depicting his arrest, he's heard expressing feelings of euphoria and contempt for the murder, stating that he did it because he wanted to, and that his mental health is completely fit. But from here is where the investigation on the crime would leave investigators puzzled, as while he basically confessed his reason for the crime while being arrested, the investigators still needed to know why he did it in the first place. Why did a seemingly normal 18-year-old find it necessary to kill a young woman for inexplicably no reason? Well, upon questioning, looking through the 52-page document and his online activities, they were left with a confusing and odd answer, as it was found through his manifesto and online message boards that Guilherme had premeditated the murder 2 weeks in advance. So now at this point, the police had intent, but they still didn't have a motive. And after combing over his manifesto, they discovered that his motivation seemed to be his disbelief in religion, especially after the events of his brother's death and his father's absence. Among this was more confusing tangents on topics such as love, drug use, parental abandonment, and family relationships, all being things that were major components of Guilherme's life up to that point. But what to me seems the most disturbing, if you can believe that, is him describing himself to be a shapeshifter, and on occasion, he would wear different masks depending on the occasion to fit these different roles, which during the murder can be seen in the many videos and pictures he took from the scene, as he appears to be wearing a mask from the character Ghost from Call of Duty. He's also seen in this same mask in a video he recorded when he was with his brother prior to his arrest, adding some validity to the claim. But the last, but certainly not least, is the detail in the manifesto that he planned to commit more murders for some holier purpose, and that he was a part of some kind of army to commit similar crimes. But police believed that he hadn't committed any more murders besides the one that he did on Ingrid. But after the investigation came the trial to get this monster locked up, and you'd think with all the evidence they'd collected it would be a slam dunk case, and it was looking like he was going to be locked up for a long time. But out of nowhere, after interviewing with some lawyers and a news agency called Record, he claims, "I didn't know what I was doing. I was out of my mind, and that I didn't think about the consequences of the act." And a psychologist had interviewed Guilherme and concluded that he had a persistent delusional disorder and an antisocial personality disorder. So while this muddied the water during the trial, it ultimately didn't help, as a year and a half later he was sentenced to 14 years in prison for the murder of Ingrid. And while I'm glad justice was served, I wish more would have been dealt, as from everything I've read about Ingrid, she seems like a great person, and this death was senseless in every sense of the word. And it was all caused from an individual who couldn't seek help properly. And I'm just disturbed that anyone could even find it in their heart to do something like this. But with that story all wrapped up, time to move on to the tale of Mark Bradford. He went on and I just lost it. Rage, trolling, and irrational thoughts. 3 things that pretty much happen simultaneously in any game of COD, and when combined, can lead to some interesting outcomes. But on one such occasion, this led to a situation that can only be described as degenerate. That's what leads us to the story of Mark Bradford. Mark was an ordinary man living in the suburbs of St. Bordeaux, England, and while much isn't known about the man prior to the incident, what we do know is that in June 2011, Mark was playing a game of Call of Duty Black Ops, and on this one fateful day, on top of already having an awful day in general, Mark was getting absolutely demolished by a younger player in the game. To add insult to injury, the younger player was shit-talking him the whole time while doing this, basically lighting the fuse to the man who was ready to explode. But unfortunately for the young troll, things weren't going to be very funny after this, as Mark had seemingly had enough of the child's trolling, and after he'd figured out the child's location, he planned on teaching the boy a lesson he'd soon never forget. Unluckily for the boy, Mark was merely 200 yards away from his house, and what ensued can only be described as mind-boggling, as a 46-year-old man entered the child's home and began to strangle the child. This continued until the mother of the child intervened and pulled the grown man off the child before any more serious damage could occur. And after Mark had felt his handiwork was taken care of, he simply went back home, probably to play some more COD to cool off. After the fact, the child was observed to have scratch marks and bruising around his neck, and sometime after the attack, Mark was finally apprehended by authorities soon after. The aftermath of the violent outburst is a bit surprising, as during the trial it was apparent that everyone involved felt the situation was pathetic, as a quote from Judge Robert Morgan Jones, who presided over the court case, was quoted in saying, "Mr. Bradford, you are a 46-year-old man. It is of great concern that you, as an adult, who I would expect to be able to control yourself, managed to blur the lines between fantasy and the real world in which you live in. In July, you were playing an online game in which you can communicate with others playing. As a result of what happened during this game, words were pressed between you and a 13-year-old boy. Clearly, you were upset, and then you decided to leave your home address and physically confront the child. This involved you putting your hands around his neck. I do not accept whatever he said. He was a vulnerable victim, and placing your hands around his neck put him in fear of injury. It must have been a very frightening experience for him. The seriousness of this case means a custodial sentence is appropriate. The issue is whether to suspend it. I take into your account your guilty plea and the remorse you've shown." The mother of the boy was also quoted in saying, "It's pathetic that a grown man would attack a defenseless child like this. If you can't handle losing to a child, then you shouldn't be playing games." But Mark himself even commented on his actions and seemed pretty apologetic, as he said, I'd been playing the whole day and he was just baiting me, and just would not shut up. He went on and I just lost it. I hold my hands up. I lost the plot. In a moment of madness, I went round to his house. I didn't know what I was going to do. It wasn't malice, the injuries weren't bad, but I do regret it. I just grabbed him. I've seen him since and apologize. We've played online too. He's actually a decent kid. But after being put on bail for 8 weeks, needing an electronic tracking device, and having to pay the family of the child £80, Mark was sentenced to 16 weeks in jail. So ultimately, if you don't have the ability to just turn the game off and walk away, you can end up like poor Mark over here. So with that breaking disgusting violence out of the way, it's time to talk about our next story, and that is the story of Noah Crooks. I'm never going to be able to marry. I'm never going to be able to get a good job now. I'll barely be able to get a job at McDonald's. I had plans to go to Michigan State University to get an engineering job. All that is down the drain now. March 24th, 2012, Osage, Iowa. The Osage police received a call from a boy who claimed he killed his own mother. Noah Crooks is an infamous case of what can go wrong when a child can't handle discipline. And unfortunately for the Crooks family, Noah found it reasonable to handle his punishment with murder, as on the night of March 24, 2012, 13-year-old Noah Crooks would shoot his mother 22 times in the chest, neck, and head with a .22 caliber rifle. But that was just the tip of the iceberg. After murdering his mother, he first texted his dad trying to explain what happened. "Dad, this is Noah. I killed Mom accidentally. I regret it. Come home now, please." And at the time, Noah's father was away at a party with his coworkers, so just thinking his son was joking, he responded back with, "Okay, just throw her in the grove. We'll take care of her later," not knowing his son actually killed his wife. But after Noah confessed to his dad, he called 911, where the gruesome and downright disgusting details were revealed, as when the 911 operator picked up the call, Noah in a calm manner stated what had happened, and went on a rant that was completely baffling. Instead of showing any remorse for what he just did to his mother, the boy instead complained that this all started because his mom took away his game, Call of Duty. And because this absolutely deplorable act of taking a video game away, that his life was basically over. But the most unthinkable thing that came from this rant was Noah admitting he tried to rape the corpse of his dead mother, but stated he couldn't, saying to the operator, "Something came over me and I'm serious. I'm 13 years old and I killed my mom with my .22. I'm not joking at all. She's dead. I'm scared. I killed my mom with my .22. I don't know why I did it. I'm so ashamed right now." He repeated that several times in the course of the 10-minute conversation. "Okay, this is Noah, okay? I don't want you to contact the news or anything like that. I feel crazy, and I know I'm not. I think I have some form of ADD. I tried to rape her. But I couldn't do it." He rambled on for several minutes as the dispatcher contacted deputies and dispatched an ambulance. "Tell them my weapon is empty. I just wish it was a dream so I could wake up and kiss her and hug her. I need to get help. I don't know why I did it. I've never thought about doing it before. Something just got in my head and I don't know why." He continued talking about playing the video game Call of Duty. He told the dispatcher his mother took away the game because he got some bad grades. "Something just came over me. I'm gonna have to move away. I'm never gonna be able to get a good job now. I should have never played Call of Duty. I'm never gonna be able to marry. I'm never gonna be able to get a good job now. I'll barely be able to get a job at McDonald's. I mean, I had plans to go to Michigan State University to get an engineering job. All that is down the drain now. I'm gonna have to move. I'm going to jail. I tried to rape my own mom. Who tries to rape their own mom? My life is down the drain now. They're not going to shoot me or kill me, are they?" During the call, the police had shown up to the scene of the crime. Noah calmly greeted them at the door, and after taking the boy away, authorities saw the bullet-riddled corpse of Noah's mom, who was seated on the couch. She was examined to have approximately 20-plus bullet wounds to her chest, neck, and head, and she was completely naked from the waist down, proving that Noah's statement about trying to rape his mother was terrifyingly correct. And after arriving on scene, the police called Noah's father and gave him the awful news. This shocked and confused the man, as he was potentially one of the only people to know about the murder prior to police showing up. During the investigation, police only wanted one thing: a reason. Why did Noah do what he did? They had all the evidence in the world to prove he murdered his mother, but they still had no clue what could drive a seemingly normal child to up and murder his mother in cold blood. Well, that would prove difficult, as every answer they found would reveal many more questions. Like that Noah's mother was the disciplinarian of the household, and this would cause conflict. So when she found out that Noah's grades were slipping, in a last-ditch effort to try to convince the boy to get better grades, she took away his game, in hopes that the game's absence would now allow Noah to get better grades. This seemed to be the straw that broke the camel's back to Noah, but what was odd from this is, from all accounts, they had a good relationship, and while they had disputes every now and then like normal families do, there was no underlying malice towards his mother that police could find. Another thing was that Noah, for the most part up until recently, was described as a normal child. He hadn't even gotten really into any major trouble before this, and the boy and his family regularly attended therapy. So detectives were stuck until they interviewed some of Noah's friends from school and his father. That is when the glaring problems showed themselves. While to most of Noah's family, the boy seemed normal from the outset, in school it was found out he was completely different. According to his friends, Noah was a bully in school. And not only that, but he would apparently stab fellow classmates with his pencils. And shockingly enough, he had told his friends that he wanted to kill his mother prior to the actual murder. And he even expressed feelings of wanting to kill some of his classmates as well. But if that wasn't crazy enough, apparently Noah's father told police that the boy had expressed feelings of wanting to kill his mother as well. He just thought it was a joke, in which in hindsight was a very unfortunate misunderstanding. To go along with this, he'd also been getting increasingly more violent leading up to the murder. He had been breaking windows around the house, and he had been taking knives and stabbing random things around the house, such as pillows, wooden pillars, and even doors. To go along with this, he'd been cruel to animals and supposedly burnt his grandmother's house down. But I couldn't find much more about that than it being cited in a few articles, so take with that as you wish. But after hearing these revelations, police were certain they could prove Noah had done the murder in cold blood. And what was the final move to take down this house of cards were comments made by psychologists who had interviewed Noah, as they felt he was perfectly fine when committing the murder. As Dr. Michael Turner, who interviewed Noah, said that he found his actions were part of a parcel of deeply ingrained personality traits which have been there for years, despite his relative youth, and will continue to be present for the foreseeable future. He then added, "With a strong degree of medical certainty, I can state that the prospects for rehabilitating Noah Crooks prior to his 18th birthday are nil. He has no psychiatric illness which had any impact on his actions, which might be treated." As well, another psychologist, Dr. Anna Salter, stated, "It was not done in the heat of the moment. There was no indications that he was psychotic or even upset at the time of the shooting. And finally, he has a series of personality traits that are very difficult to treat. I do not believe that at present there is any way to treat a lack of conscience, total lack of empathy, and extreme callousness. I'm pessimistic about any chance that any treatment program can successfully treat these traits, even with a much longer frame of time." So upon gathering this information, it was time to seek justice for Noah's mother. So a preliminary trial was started in 2013. The prosecution's stance was firm and almost unchallengeable. For the defense for Noah, they tried to argue that the boy had been suffering from mental illness and that he had gone undiagnosed. We're going for the insanity plea and diminished responsibility defense, which in layman's terms means they were trying to get a lesser sentence if they were successful. Noah's defense attorney, William Kitmus, stated Noah was suffering from an undiagnosed case of intermittent explosive disorder, a disorder that is characterized by repeated episodes of impulsive, aggressive, or violent behavior. And he added that the violent outburst was caused by Noah's mother taking away his game of Call of Duty. But after testimony was presented, it was time for the closing arguments. And prosecutor Denise Timmons stated in her closing statement, "The last thing she saw before she died was her own son raising a gun at her and pulling the trigger. He wanted to see his mother's face when she died." While Noah's defense attorney wanted to remind the court Noah was a sick boy, stating in his statement, "In this little boy's background, common sense would tell you that he was a very sick boy. He had the idea to have sexual intercourse with his own mother." But on May 13th, 2013, the jury found Noah Crooks guilty of murder in the second degree. But before he would serve any jail time, as according to Iowa's youth offender status, Noah was to be transferred to the juvenile court system until he turned 18. This was to see if the rehabilitative services provided in the juvenile system were effective enough before proceeding on to a more intense trial. But upon interviews from more psychologists and a seemingly unchanged Noah after the rehabilitative services provided at the youth program, on May 8th, 2016, the Iowa court gave Noah a 50-year sentence and ordered him to pay $150,000 in restitution to his father. But just to think, if Noah didn't prioritize getting better at COD over everything else, this potentially could have been avoided. But it's also fair and realistic to say that Noah was just a ticking time bomb, and this is the incident that set him off. But what is for certain is that Noah ended the life of a great person, and ruined not only his own life, but the life of anyone who knew and loved his mother. But for the last degenerate of this video, it's of one of the more well-known cases, and that is the case of Tyler Barriss or the 2017 Wichita swatting.
I just wish I could have, rewound somehow, and just never done it. It hasn't just affected my life, it's affected, someone's family too, as well. Someone lost their life.
Swatting, a phenomenon that has baffled many since the first recorded case happened back in 2009. And while the crime isn't so commonplace as it's mostly contained to online circles, it's still a troubling dark cloud that hangs over the head of many when on the internet. Because as heinous as the crime is, almost any person can do it for almost any reason, and there's very little in the way to stop it. If it happens, the crime can have a very drastic outcome, especially if the person who's being swatted has no idea what's going on and acts drastically out of fear. And this can be seen with one of, if not the most infamous swatting cases to happen, that being the case of Andrew Thomas Finch, or better known as the Tyler Barriss swatting case, which led to one of the largest media exposed cases that the internet has seen. But prior to the fateful night of the swatting, it's important to understand the background of the degenerate human that would do such a thing. Tyler Barriss, otherwise known online from his infamous alias Swatistic, had experienced much hardship in his life, as early on in his life his family structure was shaken as he lost his father as an infant, and basically had no relationship with his mother as she turned to drugs and the street life to accompany much of her time. So this disconnect from an early age set the groundwork for Tyler to grow up a loner, as he often looked to video games to fill the voids left in his life. And as the amount of time he dedicated to video games grew, so did his aspirations on maybe making it into a career, as he thought he could maybe one day become good enough to go pro. But much like his life prior to gaming, Tyler was hit with the hard reality that he wasn't very good, crushing all hopes he had of making something out of his obsessive hobby. But like they say, when one door closes, another opens, and that door so happened to change not only Tyler's life, but many others to come. Because he had spent most of his days in online lobbies, he became intimately familiar with the concept of swatting, or the practice of making prank phone calls to emergency services in an attempt to bring about the dispatch of a large number of armed police officers to a particular address. As what drove him to becoming one of the most infamous swatters of all time started when Tyler himself was swatted. This single act emboldened the trouble boy. Instead of seeing it as an extremely scary one-off thing, he became infatuated with the idea of inflicting that very fear into others. So, with some time, he became very proficient at tracking IPs, using VPNs, and using voice-altering software, and even making scripts so he could effectively trick any law enforcement into thinking a serious crime was happening. And in 2015 was when Tyler got his first taste for swatting, and once there was blood in the water, Tyler went on a frenzy. Tyler was out of control. He swatted just about any person for any reason, and didn't stop with random individuals. He began swatting convention centers where he knew gaming tournaments were being played, and even TV stations. The latter of which would be the driving force to him committing the worst of these swatting attacks. Because around the time of 2017, Tyler felt he was invincible due to the sheer number of successful swattings he'd done. He'd become careless, basically, and called in a bomb threat to news station KABC. This led to Tyler getting arrested and serving 15 months in jail. After getting out of jail and becoming homeless, he honed his anger into swatting by any means necessary. He was no longer afraid of the consequences, which stepped it up a whole nother level, which left a high school and even the FCC headquarters in Washington, D.C. in his wake. And to add insult to injury, the FCC headquarters was in the middle of a live-streamed voting event at the time of the swatting. This live event, which was seen by tens of thousands of people, was a large mark that added to the infamy of Tyler, and as his infamy grew, more people would begin to take notice. And strangely enough, Tyler began getting hired to swat people in places like a rent-a-swatter. This unusual and straight-up deranged practice would lead into the events of December 28, 2017, or the event that would make Tyler a marked man. You see, this tragic incident would start from a low-stakes wager match on the game Call of Duty World War II, as two amateur gaming teams, that being LOL and Nuke the Children, participating in a wager match that only had $1.50 on the line. And whilst there wasn't very much on the line, when the dust settled, LOL had lost the wager match, and while most would shake off an insignificant loss like this, the members of LOL began infighting and began blaming each other for the loss. This led to two of the members, that being Casey Viner, who went by the gamertag of Vaporizer, and Chin Gaskill, who went by the gamertag of Miracle, getting into a heated exchange that bled into real life as the two started shit-talking each other on Twitter. This petty beef would lead into Casey getting into contact with Tyler Barriss, and the two would communicate back and forth in DMs, ultimately ending in Casey getting Tyler to do what he's known for, and giving him the address of what he thought was Shane Gaskill. Before the actual swatting occurred, Shane also DM'd Tyler after finding out Shane set him up. He played into the game, taunting Tyler to swat him. This led to Shane giving Tyler what he thought was his own address, leading to this 911 call to the Wichita Police Department.
Hello?
This is 911. What's going on? Hello?
Yeah.
This is 911. What's going on?
I recently got disconnected. I had told you guys everything that happened about the argument with my mom and dad. Until they get here, or?
As long as you need me to, okay?
Yeah, I'm thinking about, because I already poured gasoline all over the house. I might just set it on fire.
Okay, well, we don't need to do that, okay?
In a little bit, I might.
Why would you do that?
Do you have my address correct?
Can you verify it for me again?
It's 1033 West McCormick Street. My zip code is 67213.
After the call was placed, the Wichita police and SWAT units were sent to the residence. But unbeknownst to authorities, Tyler Barriss and even Casey Viner, the address that he thought was Shane Gaskill's current address was actually Shane's old address. And in fact, a new family had moved into the home by that time. This being the Finch family, and 28-year-old Andrew Finch would become the unintended victim of this swatting, as when authorities showed up to the house, they ordered everyone out. But put yourself in the Finch family's shoes for a second. Remember, the Finch family have no knowledge of what's going on. They literally have no clue someone who lived halfway across the country just sent SWAT and police to their house for basically no reason. So as Andrew exited the house first, he seemed compliant. Confused and frightened, but compliant. And all seemed to be going as good as it could get. But that would change as Officer Justin Rapp, who was on scene at the time of the incident, thought he saw Finch reaching for his waist. Fearing the man was drawing a weapon, he shot the man, mortally wounding him. It was later found that Andrew was unarmed and the police, and by extension Tyler, had killed an innocent man. The aftermath of the shooting was massive, as the case made worldwide news and was seen as the first recorded death due to swatting. And due to the mass amounts of media attention this was getting, Tyler tried downplaying his involvement by going onto Twitter and basically claiming to not be guilty as he felt he had little to do with Andrew's actual death. Saying on Twitter, "I didn't get anyone killed because I didn't discharge a weapon, and being a SWAT member isn't my profession." He then goes so far to prove his innocence by going on to Drama Alert and say he simply wasn't the one responsible for Andrew's death. He didn't pull the trigger, so he wasn't responsible.
An attempt was made to swat that address.
So you swatted that address, correct?
Sure.
Okay,
Right.
so you swatted the address, you put in the fake hostage situation, correct?
Yep.
And then this guy gets killed.
That's what happened, I guess.
And you said
you
said this on Twitter. You said, "I didn't get anyone killed because I didn't discharge a weapon, and being on a SWAT member isn't my profession." So do you take
agree with that.
right? Do you take any responsibility for what happened?
The argument can be made that the police would have never showed up if I didn't make the call. However, I don't believe that I'm the only guilty party involved in this whole incident.
But all this would not help Tyler as the police were closing in fast, and in 24 hours after the call to Wichita police, he was taken into custody by them. And to say Tyler was screwed was an understatement, as authorities had not only had the chat logs between Tyler and Casey originally organizing the swatting, they also had the massive amount of proof that Tyler had posted onto his own Twitter account, basically admitting to the swatting in Wichita and over 100 more people and locations. The case was a slam dunk, and within the year, on October 2018, Tyler was given an additional 46 charges on top of what he already had. This being due to the shooting of the Finch household and the bomb threat made to the FCC headquarters. And thankfully, another full year later, on March 29, 2019, Tyler Barriss was charged and sentenced to 20 years in prison. But Tyler isn't the only one in this case to get charged, as also Casey Viner, the one who originally arranged the swatting, and Shane Gaskill, the one who gave the false address, got charged. Viner got 15 months in jail, and Gaskill got 18 months in jail. But Officer Jason Rapp wouldn't be charged with anything in accordance to the shooting, which was extremely controversial to many and angered the Finch family, who felt he had some responsibility as well. And while I personally would have locked up Tyler Barriss in the clink for longer, I'm glad that some justice was served in this case. But that all doesn't make up for the fact that a man was basically killed over $1. May Andrew rest in peace, and hopefully his family still seek the justice they feel they deserve. Call of Duty will always have a reputation attached to it. Whether it be positive or negative, I guess depends on the person you ask, but one thing can be for certain. Whether it be intentional or not, the game attracts a large number of odd individuals. And while they aren't the majority, and I wouldn't classify the whole COD community as such, it's interesting that a divisive game can hold such a dark underbelly, as most people have never heard of cases like this. And while these subhuman individuals that I highlighted are the worst amongst them, and are a dark stain on an otherwise neutral community, it's ironic that the company that makes these games has in recent times been exposed for some less than great practices. So it's fair to say that Call of Duty is a game made by degenerates for degenerates. As the years go on, that statement rings louder and louder every year. Thanks for watching. I hope you have an incredible day, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace out.